right, welcome back. Ever since this gentleman and his partner stood up and walked into the limelight, however meager it was in the beginning, many intelligent people immediately recognized that the work being done by George Ure and Clif at halfpasthuman.com was literally unprecedented, at least in terms of our access to, shall we say, advanced, very sensitive kinds of projections of the future. In other words, the collective unconscious has a big mouth if you know how to read it. How are you doing there, Clif?
I'm doing well tonight. I'm finding the universe very amusing at the moment.
Tell me.
Well, it's just that everything seems to be cooperating, and I was looking for some temporal markers to show up, and indeed they are. Three specifically were the woman wearing scars, and we've had that as an archetype that's shown up in two instances, with the woman with the face replacement, and then the woman that Biden met in Lebanon who had been scarred in a car bombing. And then we were looking for a temporal marker on the coagulation of the government, and we saw that Obama is going to start reviewing the Department of Defense for cuts. And then we had also looking for the temporal marker of the language showing up about the powers that be being afraid of losing control, one of their three main methods of control. We thought it was going to be the press, and I have to say that it's sort of a partial hit.
Well, better a partial hit than a swing and a miss.
Exactly. I mean, we caught just the edge of it there because they are indeed discussing now about how basically it's coming out of Bilderberger that there is a very palpable level of anxiety that things have already gone too far and control is slipping away from them in the money realm. So this is, we considered that temporal marker fairly accurate for our projection purposes. It's just kind of weird that the universe is cooperating on all of this. Like George says, we have a rickety time machine, and it's something in many ways like a cartoon experience, and it's so therefore that much more amazing when the universe decides to put substance behind our strange projections.
Well, the universe has put quite a bit of substance behind your very unstrange projections. I mean, when you guys hit it last October, what was 7th. The date? I can't remember.
Yeah, October 7th.
Yeah, that was the date that Mario Lanza died, you know.
Yeah, oddly enough, yeah.
So, anyway, I'm not saying there's a linkage there, but...
No, everything is interlinked, and that's what really it comes down to is the inability of the ruling class to feel, experience, or acknowledge what Buckminster Fuller called the holonomy, that is to say the holographic nature of universe, because we all embody universe within ourselves, and, you know, we're all part, every atom can see every other atom, etc. So, no, that's very much a case is that it undoubtedly is connected. That kind of energy probably decided just didn't want to stick around.
Wouldn't blame it.
Yeah, I felt that way myself some days, you know.
Yes. No, I totally understand. Friend of ours, I won't identify him, has sent in some very good questions for you, and I thought we might just walk through these.
Sure, have at it.
By the way, let me remind all of you that the destination is halfpasthuman.com. And there's some very interesting news coming up later on tonight about the cost of availing yourselves of these fascinating reports. Absolutely fascinating. So stay tuned for that. All right. Number one. Specifically, what does Clif see for the banking system and the Federal Reserve? Collapse? Catastrophic failure? Something else? And what timeline potential?
We know the timeline fairly accurately, and we know the end result. We can project the end result is that the language says that the underlying product of the Federal Reserve, which is the FERN, the Federal Reserve note that we all call the dollar, is going to reach a stage of being, and this is the phrase from the data, rejected by all. So it'll be totally worthless, and no one will deal with it, and that probably means also here in the U.S. That timeline will be very pronounced, and will start around November 5th or November 8th with some visibility, November 8th of this year, and then it'll run through until about March of 2010, by which time the emotional meme will have pretty much swept around the whole planet. So we figure that it'll take about 6 months for the whole effect to ripple to the point where even people in the depths of the Amazon jungles will say, no way, Jose, ain't taking dollars.
I see. All right. So the death of the dollar on the way, at least in terms of the world's reserve currency at a bare minimum. The
Correct.
United States,
we may still
United
use
States,
the green paper and call it dollars.
That's what I mean.
Right, but it won't necessarily be Federal Reserve backed anymore. We show that the Federal Reserve goes to a status of a very complex
absurdity.
Linguistic structure where basically we start ignoring them because they're ineffectual in all respects as of, again, around November. Now, this is going to be in spite of the language you'll hear them pronouncing, though.
I see.
So we're going to be faced with that.
This is good.
Yeah, we're going to be faced with that duality for a while.
Okay. All right, but the dollar as we know it, as a physical piece of paper, put it in your wallet, and so on and so forth, part of our language, our culture, will remain for the near future.
Well, yes.
Here in the United States.
Well, speaking of it that way, we actually keep referring it occasionally to it as the greenback dollar, and that's actually a misnomer. The current Federal Reserve note is not the greenback dollar. The greenback dollar originates from in the 1800s, yet the word and the phrase still persist, and it just keeps being reapplied to different currency over and over as we
Well, Al Gore would like that.
Yeah, we're like reusing, yes, and reapplying. But the dollar is going to suffer some really serious strains as we hit the period, a lunar month more or less, from July 15th to August 16th, in which the derivative bubble is going to run into some hurdles. Bear in mind, derivatives at their core, these complex abstractions worked out by scientists that are too often too caffeinated and not astute enough, all of those relate at some point to something that's real. So, for instance, some of the derivatives are based on soybean contracts. Some of the derivatives are based on copper, others on interest rates, and so on. But all derivatives at their core are a confidence game, and so once the confidence is shattered in any given large area of a derivative a resource, then it's going to spread throughout the whole system, and that process begins after July. We think it'll probably go with soybeans.
This is GMO soybeans first. All right. Good riddance. Derivatives.
Correct.
2 quadrillion, 1.5 quadrillion. How big is that? That absurd
unknown,
bubble?
and any estimate you hear is by someone who does not know. It's one of those things that people who are aware of the true magnitude know it cannot be calculated.
That's a good answer. True. Understand. That makes more sense than anything else I've heard.
Right. So
People
anybody
throw
spouting
these
off an
figures
actual
around.
number to you is it's just their monkey mind coming up and hoping that you'll believe it.
Oh yeah. And all we do is see numbers. This number, that number, this number, that.
It's part of the hypnosis
amazing.
process. The American populace, this is why the Russians and the other parts of the planet, it really pays everyone to read foreign press in any form they can get hold of, because it points out to the American populace just how hypnotized we are.
Oh.
But of course, you got to break through a little bit to want to go read the foreign press to see what's really going on. So.
Well, you got some good Russian press TV in Iran is good, well worth reading. Their Xinhua agency, the Chinese news agency, is good for getting a different perspective.
Oh yeah, Russian Today and all of these places are just excellent. Many of them have English language broadcasts.
Well, Pravda, are you? Even though that's actually produced in Greece, I understand, but nonetheless. Okay, let's see. We're coming up on a break here. Zimbabwe, the absurdity down there. Do you see any kind of a potential for inflation like that here?
Oh yeah, we've had the hyperinflation word for some time, and it'll be part and parcel of the whole process of the dollar death. The dollar's dying now. It's been dying for a couple of years. Everybody will acknowledge this, and it isn't a corporate economist. But around October 26th, something is going to happen in the background. There's going to be a 10-day period of time of consternation. Let's just put it that way.
Consternation.
People at the upper levels dealing with indigestion en masse. And we believe that that's the point that we really start hitting hyperinflation. And it may affect
October
$50.
again.
I'm sorry?
October again.
October 26th, right. October again, funny, yeah. but the real visible part starts off for us in the U.S. around November 5th.
Just
Maybe
in
as
time
late
for
as
the
8th.
holidays. A holiday greeting. A
Yeah.
Thanksgiving surprise.
Yeah, and it's it's sad, but I have to have almost a gallows humor approach about it just to stay sane in the sight of all of this.
I agree. Not a day goes by when I don't laugh. It's absurd.
It's
beyond absurd. We are actually, aren't we, Cliff, getting to a point where we're running out of words to adequately describe this to people?
This is why it's so frustrating. People say unprecedented, and that word has no meaning anymore. And you start talking about the numbers involved, and all of the mainstream press always says, well, the astronomical numbers involved in the bailout. And no, astronomers don't use numbers this big. These are numbers beyond what astronomers use.
We've literally burned our language up on a viral assault of hyperbole.
Yeah.
A pandemic of hyperbole. And look
well,
what's
let's hope it's not a pyre. A funeral pyre.
Oh, yes, a pyre, indeed. Okay, back in just a minute with Mr. Clif High. And give my best to George, of course, and we'll have George back on here pretty soon. I want to hear his economic views. HalfPastHuman.com, the report that everyone has been talking about, is going to be available to all of you at a far lower price as Cliff and George reach out to the world at large to try to make this affordable. We'll tell you more about that as we continue. More questions as well with Cliff coming up next. You have talked about getting gold and silver coins for obvious reasons. When will gold and silver have widely accepted barter purchasing power? This fall, next year? How much will gold and silver be worth? Gold, 20,000, silver, 300 an ounce? Any guesses?
I have guesses, but once again we go to numbers, and numbers are inherently unreliable in our work, okay, because numbers fill the internet. They just litter everything, and it's difficult to have an emotional attachment to numbers unless they're written out as text. So as a rule...
Dangerous business to do so, yeah.
Yeah, so as a rule we have a tendency to not pay any attention to those. But we do have a ratio. Our ratio seems to suggest that post-hyperinflation, following the hyperinflation, when everything stabilizes for a while, the resulting ratio will be the Dow equals X and a price of a single ounce of gold equaling 3 times X. So if the Dow were at $300 for all the Dow stocks,